I exhaled and inhaled deeply, trying to breathe in his scent, but all I could smell was lab frog. I stood up, knocking over several other students. I checked my email after school, and I already had 44 emails from my mom. I clicked one at random. Belle. Answer this email right now or I'm calling the police. Too late. I just called the police. They're asking me if it's an emergency and I'm saying yes. I'm saying you've been ignoring your mother. I'm saying you're being held hostage at a dock. That should do it. Love, Mom. I quickly wrote her back, trying to sound as cheerful as possible. But it was hard to conceal my depression from her. She knew me too well. She knew that when I wrote that I had met a nice girl to be friends with, it meant that most of the people at school were boring. She knew that when I said Dad and I were getting along fine and he had even bought me a car, it meant that a demonic boy at school was being mean to me. Thank God we came up with this secret code when I was little to confuse cyberstalkers. I wanted to tell her that Switchblade wasn't so bad. If only something dangerous would happen. Or not necessarily something dangerous, but someone dangerous. Then maybe my mom wouldn't have to be so concerned for my well-being. I whipped up a few racks of lamb for dinner. Belle, you really didn't have, my dad began as he sat down at the table. No, Dad, I said. I used to cook all the time in Phoenix. Really? It's fine. I wish you'd let me cook every once in a while, he said. It's just, I love your cooking, but I told you I was a vegetarian, and… You don't like it, Dad? I asked concernedly, worried that I hadn't cut the meat into small enough pieces or fun enough shapes. No, it's great, Belle. I know it's been hard for you here. It's great. I smiled as he took another bite. At least Dad was trusting me a little more in the kitchen. By the next morning, the rain had turned to snow. I wasn't too thrilled. I liked being able to travel to and from class via puddle, jumping from one to the next and rating the puddle on the Bell Goose scale, a scale from 1 to 5 where 1 represents dry land and 5 represents a tsunami. Jim had already left by the time I got up. I spent a half hour worrying that he hadn't found the bread I had left for him in the cabinet, or the milk I had left in the milk carton. Then I put on my puffiest snow cape and hurried outside. My U-Haul was snowed in, but fortunately I have arms, optimal for picking up huge amounts of snow and putting it elsewhere. The only trouble was, I didn't have any place to put the snow besides my front yard. So, I put the piles in the back of my U-Haul. Then I realized this was a great opportunity to make a giant slushie. I ran back inside for the sugar and red food coloring. I sprinkled both onto the snow. As I started the truck, I thought about what I'd name my cooking show. The first thing that came to my mind was, Goose Cooks Geese. The second thing that came to my mind was, perfect. I kept hitting the brakes as I drove to avoid skidding on ice and to create a rocking sensation in my U-Haul that would mix all the ingredients in the back into one delicious slushie. At red lights, I simulated ice cream truck music by humming. When it snows, the rules of parking no longer apply, so I stopped in the street and began to walk towards the school's side entrance. That's when it happened. It wasn't in slow motion, like an old person walking, but it also wasn't in fast motion, like an old person running. It was like when you sip an energy drink with a skull on it, even though your mom said not to, and your brain kind of speeds up as you sip and then goes slower as you swallow and then speeds up and goes slower until you throw up. And then you drink another one on a dare. It was careening towards me across the sky in a perfect arc, careening so quickly that I knew I wouldn't be able to get out of the way. I'd never imagined how I would die, but I had kind of hoped it would be in a war. I had never thought it would be like this, by Snowball. And then suddenly, Edward was in front of me, his dark, curly-yet disheveled tresses blocking my view as I heard a giant squish. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't even possible. Edward had saved me. How? I asked, looking from my perfectly pristine snow cape to his jacket, soiled with snow. But Edward wasn't listening. A wide, almost otherworldly grin was spreading across his face. "Prepare for doom, Nemesis," he hollered, gathering up some snow and hurling it towards the school. I couldn't believe it. Now Edward was defending me. Edward. Edward. I screamed, relinquishing any attempt at self-control. I rushed towards him as he swiftly bent down to pick up more snow. Pinning his arms to his back, I stopped him from exciting the snowball hurler any further. "You saved my life," I cried. "Isn't that enough? Stop this endless cycle of vengeance." I perched on his back to stop him from the demonic violence he was capable of. 2 snowballs hit him in the face. He said, freeing his arms and brushing the snow from his eyes. "Hey, get off me, you girl. You're going to make me smell like girl things." I let go, mesmerized. The snow was dripping off his coat, almost as if it didn't stick to him. "How are you doing that?" I asked, successfully concealing my absolute terror of his superhuman force. "Edward has a girlfriend, Edward has a girlfriend," someone shouted. "I do not. She is not. I do not know her," he yelled, protecting our blossoming mutual intrigue from petty rumors, before turning back to me. "What?" he asked. "How am I doing what?" "The snow. It's melting off you." I took a step closer until our faces were nearly touching. You're not human, are you?" I whispered intimately. He laughed a little. Nervously. "Is this about biology class?" he asked. Because I only knew all that stuff about frogs, because I once had a frog. It's not like I go on internet sites to practice dissection or anything like that. Like nerds do. I don't even study for class. Or get good grades. I hate school things. I mean, it's like, why don't we all just skip class and, like, hang? You know? I was suddenly blushing. His shoes, covered in dirty snow, were too beautiful to be real. I bent down to investigate, poking them with my finger. He pulled his foot away quickly and nearly fell over. Miraculously, he regained balance by simply putting his foot down. "Hey! Stop," he cried. Do you like games and stuff? Like video games, computer games, board games, potato chips?" His attempts to evade my question only infuriated me more. I stood up. "I know what I saw. Someday, you will trust me enough to tell me the truth." "The truth about what?" "I'll tell you now, about bullfrogs." He laughed. "That's easy. The truth is, they absorb air through their skin." I looked over my shoulder to protect him from any listeners. There were definitely a few perked ears 30 feet away. "The truth about your abilities," I said, raising my eyebrows. I meant to raise only one like they do in detective movies, but as soon as I raised one the other sidled up as well. All I knew was, no average human would be able to jump from the sidewalk to the gutter as fast as he did. "Listen," he whispered ferociously, like a ferocious breeze or very gentle hurricane. "I am an average student, like everybody else. I do normal things on the weekend. Every day after school, I go back to my house and chill and hang until bedtime, which is whenever I want it to be because my parents are too negligent with me to set a curfew. Understand?" He gripped my shoulders tightly. I knew if I didn't concede, he would easily crush me. "Yes. I understand. But this isn't the last you'll hear from me," I muttered. That seemed to appease him. He released my shoulders and ran away, flailing his limbs in that graceful way he had. I fumed all the way to class. How did he know we were in bio together? How did he know to walk in front of me at the exact moment a snowball was coming? Why did the snowballs melt off him as if they were made of some watery substance? Most of all, why was he lying to me about his true superhuman identity? I was so upset, I accidentally started a fire in math, sending one boy to the nurse's office. I guess I had been rubbing the sticks I carry with me together so hard that, whoops, I started kindling a flame. Gee. Edward was really taking over my brain. I couldn't concentrate on anything, not even taking the Riemann sum of the approximate distances traveled in each integral of the problem I was working on. Boy, was I all out of sorts. That night I had my first dream about Edward Mullen. Carnival music was playing, and I was sitting in a colorful tent, surrounded by animals. We were all eating popcorn together and joking around. Suddenly, the tent went dark, and Edward entered the stage, alone. He was wearing stilts and saying, "Whoa. Whoa," as he walked in a wobbly way. I woke up in a cold sweat, terrified. 3. Hand prick. The month following the snowball accident was tough. People kept looking at me, especially when teachers read my name on the attendance list and I said, "Here." Somehow my new nickname for Edward, Hero, didn't catch on. So, I decided to break my unwritten, unspoken, and unthought understanding with Edward, and start telling our story. First, I told Tom and Lucy that Edward saved me from a snowball. They weren't impressed. So I started saying Edward saved me from a rock with snow around it, and, later, I started saying he saved me from an avalanche. One day, I said that Edward ran with superhuman speed, stopping a car that was about to hit me with his superhuman strength. "Wait," said the freshman girl in the cafeteria lunch line. "Edward Mullen? You mean the kid whose clothes are too small?" We looked over at Edward, who was sitting alone, doing homework due next month. "Yes," I said, gravely, taking a large bite of my pudding to prevent me from saying anything else. "You must be new here," the girl said, picking up her tray. "Mumph bleh," I said, spitting little flecks of chocolate pudding after her. She didn't answer. I knew no one would understand me in Switchblade. Still, Edward was cold towards me. I knew that he wished it had never happened, that he had never saved me, that I had never started wearing a shirt that said "Thank you, Edward." One afternoon in biology, over a month after the accident, I couldn't take it much longer. Edward looked so cute with his red curly hair and freckles, like the before picture in an ad for freckle concealer for men. Yet he was so complacent, as if he didn't need me and my alluring ear shape to pass on to his offspring. I had to do something. I poked the boy in front of me. He turned around, looking surprised. "Hey, it's Peter, right?" I asked. "Yeah," he answered, seduced. "Want to go to prom with me?" I asked, plenty loud so Edward could hear. Sure," he said. "Would it be okay if we hung out a couple of times before then?" "I don't really know you." Did Edward notice? Was he jealous? I slyly looked at his mood ring to find out. Still purplish brown. Clearly, I was going to have to do more. One date to prom wasn't enough. I turned to the boy sitting behind me, to the right. "Zach," I said. "What is it?" he asked, looking up at the board to take notes. "Will you go to prom with me?" "But, didn't you just ask Peter?" "Yeah," I said. "I want to go with you, too." He hesitated. "Well, I don't have a date yet, so, okay, I guess." "Hey, Adam," I called across the room. "Bell, please." "I'm trying to teach," said Mr. Franklin. But when I called out to Adam, he must have understood that this was an important interruption, an interruption for love, because he just sighed and continued diagramming the cell. "I already have a date, Belle," Adam whispered loudly. "Tom!" I shouted. "Belle!" Mr. Franklin yelled. I settled down in my chair, satisfied. Edward was looking now. The rain was so bad by the time school got out I had to float my U-Haul back home. I stood on the top of the truck and guided it with a long pole, pretending I was in New Orleans, about to save Edward from the flood. "So Belle," my dad said that evening at dinner. "Any boys at school catch your eye? How about Tom Newt? He seems nice." "Yeah, I guess," I said, imagining what Tom would look like as Edward. "He would look hot. Are you going to eat your spinach? Do you want it, honey?" "No, you should eat it," I said. "And mine, too. It's good for your health. Come on, Dad. Open up." I put as much spinach as I could on my fork and moved it towards his mouth. Some spinach fell onto his placemat. Some onto his lap. "The train's coming. See you Gia, see you Gia, see you Gia, coo. Coo," I chanted. "Belle, that's not the noise a train makes," he said. "They go chug-a, with a CH. "Maybe in Switchblade," I said skeptically. This place certainly was backwards. I wanted to look especially good in bio the next day, because I was sure that it was the day Edward would ask if he could be my third date to prom. That night I wrapped my hair in springs from the armchair in our living room to make it curly. I even put in false teeth. On my way to school the next morning, I felt light and bouncy, but that could be because I'd left in some springs. I went to the bio classroom 4th period to be sure I was on time for 6th. It was dark and Mr. Franklin was sorting beakers in the closet. He let me eat my lunch there as long as I covered my desk in aluminum foil for cleanliness. The bell rang. I sat up super straight in my chair and smiled with my big, straight teeth. Students began to come through the door. Tom, Adam, Lucy, followed by more students. No Edward. I stopped smiling and removed the teeth. Just when I thought Edward was a normal, jealous boy, he does something unpredictable, like not show up to class with roses. "Okay, guys," Mr. Lookiner began. "My nephew needs a blood transfusion, so I want to know all of your blood types." He sounded proud of this idea. He put on a pair of rubber gloves, which made an ominous slap as they hit his skin. I cringed. Slap. 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 "Okay, I'll stop," he said. "That's just such a cool sound." Still no Edward. Why this day to be absent? Absent from bio? He had been in English. I knew this because I delivered a note to him from the principal's office when he was in class. It said, "Hey cutie. I really wished I were principal of this school. I'd give him so much detention. He deserves it, for cutting class instead of asking me out." Mr. Franklin was detailing the procedure. "I'll be coming around with a medical consent form, so don't start until I get to you. Those of you who aren't AB can sit in the back and chat." A few kids cheered. "But," he continued, "not until I know everyone's blood type. Now, I want you to carefully prick your finger with one of these knives from my kitchen." He grabbed Adam's hand and cut off a bit of his pointer finger. Blood spurted out and landed on Mr. Franklin's lab coat and the back of a nearby girl's blouse. As I watched the dripping arc of crimson, I suddenly felt nauseous. Where was he? Why wouldn't he come to class on a day when we were doing such a fun lab? Suddenly, there he was. Edward. Edward, standing there with his short buzz cut and masculine jaw, rough with light hair. There was something red stuck in his teeth. With a rush of nausea, I suddenly understood what he was. Dentist patient. I realized the whole class was silent, staring at me. I guess I must have said that out loud. Oops. Then I thought, no, that can't be right. Edward has naturally perfect teeth. I got out of my seat quickly so I might lightly slap Edward in the face with my hair. I approached the materials table, where he was standing, shoving a pack of Twizzlers into his backpack. I swung my head. And then the next thing I knew, I was looking up at Mr. Franklin and Lucy's faces. "Hey guys," I said. "Belle, you fell," Lucy exclaimed jealously. "No, I didn't." "Yes, Belle, you tripped on the leg of your chair. I think you were unconscious for a couple of seconds," Mr. Franklin explained. "Nope," I said. Mr. Franklin stood up and rubbed both his temples, like he was drawing circles there. "Dear God," he muttered. "Why today?" "Edward," he called. "Since you've already done this lab with me during your free track, please take Belle to the nurse." "Sorry I was late, Mr. Franklin, but the Fed Challenge team needed a replacement and, just go," Mr. Franklin said. "And Belle, don't mention anything about what we're doing in class today." I looked right into Mr. Franklin's eyes. He must be some kind of mad scientist, conducting secret experiments. If things didn't work out with Edward, I could always be his Igor, digging up bones and teaching them English for chump change. "Right," I said, winking at Mr. Franklin with one eye, and then the other, to show that I really got it. "I don't need your help walking," I insisted angrily as I slithered out of the classroom on my belly. "Edward, can you carry her?" Mr. Franklin asked. "You heard her, she wants some bigger guy to do it," he said, crossing his arms and hunching his back so I could climb onto it more easily. He stiffened as I took his hair into my hands like reins and gave a gentle kick to get him going. Then he fainted. "Edward," I said, poking his crumpled form beneath me. "Are you okay? I think I better carry you to the nurses." "No. I can do this," he said, leaping to his feet. He scooped up my entire 8 pounds, 4 ounces. To be honest, I hadn't weighed myself in a few years, and we walked slowly out of the classroom. "Come on, Edward, a half step at a time," he muttered quietly, not wanting to disturb my faint slumber. "Okay. Now half step at 2 times. I rested my head on his firm, sweaty shoulder. I felt something stroking my hair. Then I felt Edward put some of my hair up to his nose, leaving it draped above his lip. He looked good with a long, full mustache. Suddenly, he released my hair. He took some Purell from his pocket and frantically rubbed it on his mouth. "So, Belle, do you have any pets?" "No," I said sadly, remembering Jared the iguana. Eventually, I had to return him to where I found him, Mr. Rich's 3rd grade class. "My mom won't let me have pets," Edward said. "It's not because she thinks I'm not responsible or anything. She just thinks I'd be too nervous to care for them, and she's probably right." "But," he continued, "I found a bat in my attic and I trapped it." Granted, it was a dead bat. "Bats, huh?" I thought, repetitively. Maybe Edward had rabies. We walked into the nurse's office. The nurse was an older woman who needed glasses, but preferred to wear them around her neck with a colorful lanyard. She looked up from her novel, Full Moon. "1 SEC, she said. "I'm almost done with this chapter." Edward and I waited. "Okay," she said. "Come on in here and lie down, and I'll get you some ice for your head." Edward let me down and the nurse brought me into the adjoining room with 2 mat-like beds. Edward watched me leave him sadly, holding his hand out towards me. When the nurse turned around, he cleverly disguised this gesture by doing the robot. After the nurse lay me down, he stood there for a while, looking like the star of an infomercial explaining what happened to his little brother when he smoked weed. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" the nurse asked after a few minutes. "Yes." "Wait," she said suddenly. "Are you Edward Mullen? I've been calling you down to the nurse's office every day now for a week. You need to get your shots for your trip to Transylvania." "No. I don't need shots. You have me confused with someone else." You must be thinking of another boy who is much bigger and braver and has a normal name." He turned and ran out of the nurse's office. The nurse was about to follow him, but then she sighed and returned to reading. I strained my neck to see Edward go around the corner, eventually getting up from my bed to follow him all the way back to class. Transylvania, I thought as I walked past the classrooms. Why did that country sound so familiar? Then I thought, maybe Edward is a foreign exchange student. I looked in through the window of our classroom door. Edward took a seat next to my empty seat. That's when I realized it didn't matter what he was, 5 feet 8 inches or 6 feet 3 inches like he said on his medical forms. I loved that crazy superhuman. Back at the nurse's office, I carefully placed Edward's medical file back in the special attention cabinet. What was he hiding, besides multiple food allergies? What was he? It was time to do some thinking. I sat down on the floor of the nurse's office and assumed a meditation pose, my hands poised upward on my crossed legs. I murmured, My mind was moving quickly, the red stuff in Edward's mouth, his being late to class during the blood lab, the bats, Transylvania. It didn't make sense. I thought for a while longer. I took an Odwalla bar break. I thought some more. Then, suddenly, I remembered the accident, and Edward's snowproof body, and his eyes that changed from I don't remember to green, and I knew. Yes. Vampire. 4. Researches. When I got home that afternoon, I told my dad I had a crime to solve so he'd leave me alone. I was glad I'd set up that detective agency last summer called Belle Goose on the Loose. I made flyers with a drawing of me as Sherlock Holmes and put them up all around Phoenix. Too bad I only ever got one case, the caper of rampant flyer littering. The culprit is still at large. After slamming the door to my room to seem like I was hot on someone's trail, I dug through my unpacked stuff until I found the CD of hyena laughter that my mom's new husband gave me on the day I left the two of them alone in Phoenix. At the time, I couldn't help but think he was trying too hard to get my respect. Now, I was glad to have a distraction from thoughts of Edward. I put the CD in my CD player, put in my headphones, and lay down on my bed, covering my head with pillows. Still, I thought about the vampire I loved, so I put a couple of suitcases on my head. Once the CD finished, I knew I couldn't stall any longer. It was 1:00 a.m., the time of night when I research the paranormal. My internet works via tin can telephones. One tin can is in the back of our computer, and the other tin can is in the back of our neighbor's, which has internet. It takes a while for the other computer to whisper the codes to our computer, so I ate some cereal, Count Chocula. Afterwards I still didn't have internet access, so I rearranged the furniture to freak out my dad. No internet. I went to sleep. 2 nights later, I had internet access. I typed in a single word, vampire. Google asked, "Did you mean vampire?" I said, yes. I felt overwhelmed and confused by the results: Nosferatu, the Buffy Summers Workout, Kristen Stewart's Onset Romance, Midnight Sun leaked, Robert Pattinson excellent blues singer. Weird. What did any of this have to do with vampires? I got up from my desk, feeling silly for looking at pictures of a beautiful couple who were clearly not vampires. This search was fruitless, there were only 62,500,000 results. I was going to have to rely on my own knowledge. Then I thought, why don't I share that knowledge with the world? I sat back down at the computer and went to the vampire Wikipedia page. I added a sentence to the article: Edward Mullen of Switchblade, Oregon, is a vampire, but don't kill him because I love him. Then I added a picture of Edward's ADS. Great, I thought, shutting off the computer. I figured this was basically the same as telling my dad I was in love with a vampire, especially because he monitored my internet activity. Suddenly, I remembered the song my dad used to sing to me every night when I was a little girl. If you ever have a crush on a vampire, I will trick him into getting into a car, then I will drive the car into a lake, and on top of the car I will put some stones. I stopped singing gleefully, realizing my dad would probably have a problem with Edward. I decided I would tell him that Edward was a vegetarian vampire, feasting solely on ketchup. The next morning I was on my way to first period when someone grabbed me from behind, reminding me of the vice principal pulling me off the stage during the talent show in Phoenix. I still don't know why my act was cut short. My alter ego Belgo is a terrific rapper and break dancer. I turned longingly, but it wasn't Vice Principal Detchard, it was Edward. "Oh, so you're talking to me now?" I asked coyly. "Yes, of course. When was I not talking to you?" I remembered last night, when I called Edward repeatedly, pretending to be selling tooth sharpeners. He had hung up every time. I decided not to mention it. "Were you okay yesterday after I brought you to the nurse?" Edward asked. "Yes. Were you?" I asked, assuming that vampires experience deep soul pain. "I think so." "Okay, great. See ya." I turned around quickly so Edward might see me from the back. I had skull barrettes in my hair, just for him. I have a lot of Halloween-themed jewelry. It all began that summer a plague fell upon my fish tank. That same summer I took up fishbone whittling. When I walked into English, I was still practicing my make-out moves on my hand. "Nice of you to join us, Belle," Mr. Schwartz said. "Yes," I said, realizing that I could be anywhere right now, even in a tomb with Edward. "It is nice of me." I turned my desk to face the window so I would be the first to see if an asteroid were coming. Frankly, I find the current custom of all desks facing the front a very dangerous one. Who's our lookout for the other three sides? The teacher? Not if he's constantly yelling at me to put down my binoculars and to stop shushing him when he starts to speak. I stared out the window at the beautiful, beautiful rain. A figure stood in the parking lot with his arms outstretched towards the sky. Edward. In one hand was a bar of soap which he brought to his face, beginning to vigorously scrub. Afterwards, he dropped the soap into a bucket and turned his head up to the cumulonimbus clouds, letting the water cleanse him as he sang an old show tune meant for no one else's ears. From his backpack, he pulled out his computer wrapped in a plastic bag. From the front pocket, he pulled out a case and unfolded a medium-sized satellite dish with Datastorm written across. He climbed up on his car and pulled down his plastic face shield, drilling the satellite into the top. My heart stopped. Was he going to chase a storm? In this weather? As the soft drizzle of the morning petered out and the sun returned, he drove off into the distance. He was a risk-taker, but he was my risk-taker. Turning my binoculars away from the window to the poster of Forbes' top 10 oil tycoons reading Jane Eyre, I could hear Angelica babbling. The whole point of sitting next to Angelica was that she was the quiet type of girl, the type that enjoys taking orders and agreeing with you when your voice reaches a certain volume. But today she would not quit yammering her head off about who cares. I heard the down-up-down inflection in her voice, which is my cue to gasp with shock. I nodded in sympathy to teach her a lesson. That's when I realized she was stifling a seizure. "Sorry," she said as she went through a series of body hiccups. "It's all right," I said forgivingly. Better Angelica than Lucy, who never apologizes for seizuring near me. Angelica was definitely a better friend than they were, but she wasn't quite best friend material. A true best friend would feel comfortable having a seizure in front of me, pausing to laugh when I did my wry epileptic impersonation. Suddenly, Angelica's eyes rolled back. "I see a room in chapter 10, she said in the raspy voice of the future. "A room full of vampires. In the corner of the room is a metal folding chair, folded up, with a red seat. 3 of its feet have black rubber stoppers to prevent scrapey noises. The 4th foot does not. One could theoretically rock in it, but that is not advisable. Beware of the crown," she finished, and then collapsed on the floor. Was that an omen? As far as I knew, only vampires and girls who'd read the major works of Jane Austen had unique abilities. In any case, I didn't see why I had to be wary of getting a crown and possibly controlling an entire nation from a comfortable throne. I tend towards diplomacy, even in games such as Risk, decreeing a ceasefire for everyone by swiping the board off the table. "This is important, Angelica," I said when she awoke from her stupor. "Is Edward in that room of vampires?" The whole class was surrounding us, yelling, "Give her some air." As if air were some wonderful gift I couldn't get myself. Sleepy," Angelica murmured. Rats. She had returned to her normal self. "Is vampires code for Edwets?" I asked. "And crown code for poison nuggets, disguised as raisins, which you pick out of cereal anyway, so don't worry about it?" But Angelica wasn't paying attention. Mouth tired, she sighed as the school nurse strapped her onto a stretcher and carried her away. Why did I have to beware? Was Edward going to hurt me? Why hadn't he hurt me yet? Was I not worth the trouble of hurting? No. I was being insecure. I was worth a lot of hurting, elaborately planned to take place in an old ballerina room with easily shattered mirrors to complete the gloriously gory spectacle. If Edward didn't think I was worth that, I'm sure some other vampire would. Before going to lunch, I ran outside to the parking lot to make sure Edward's van had returned. I let out a long, deflated bellow of a sigh as I ran around and around the 500 space lot. It wasn't there. I considered going home. Was an education worth it without a marital prospect? Then a voice popped in my head. A low, melodious voice, humming Schubert, my hallucination of Edward. I got this hallucination whenever I jeopardized my future as a Nobel laureate in physics. "Pardon me," sang the voice. "I have a terrible habit of slipping into Schubert in moments of urgency, one among many things I picked up in my mystical travels through Italy. Belle," it continued harmonically, "get your high school diploma. For me." It faded out to a hip indie song, Claire de Lune. That settled that. I wasn't sure what kind of a career in education would get me that I couldn't get using my sock puppet routine and tenacity, but I had faith in my voices. Why, just the other day while I was slipping, hadn't I had a vision I might fall? Resolved, I decided to put my life in the hands of my precarious brain figment and finish high school. The next day an activities fair was going on in the cafeteria. Each table was turned into a booth with a neatly decorated poster board. I particularly admired the Teens for Fascism display. Those teens must be really devoted to their club if they used zigzag scissors. Maybe I hadn't given fascism the consideration it deserved. Belle. I looked over. Lucy was standing beneath a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans poster. "Join my club." "No, thank you," I said icily. But I was not thankful, and I think I conveyed that through my tone. I had no intention of supporting a show that encouraged the genocide of an already endangered species of immortals. I decided to use frown power. This is where you socially deter people from being bigoted by frowning at their ignorant remarks. I got up real close, looked that poster straight in the eye, and frowned until I could feel the power of my moral triumph rushing through my circulatory system. I grabbed that poster, turned it around, drew a skull and crossbones, and ripped it up. I would become a table booth pirate. Who would be the first to know my cunning? I saw a table with a sign that read, "The beauty of price elasticity and free pizza." I resented the beauty of price elasticity, but I kind of liked free pizza. I drew closer to the booth to pirate a slice, suddenly discerning the figure manning it. Edward was back. "Belle?" Edward asked as my hand reached up for a slice from my hiding spot beneath the table. "Huh? Oh. Edward. I didn't recognize you. Thanks for the pizza. Listen, I'd love to join your club sometime, but I've gotta do things. Make some toast for Jim. He's an idiot. Stay. If you like pizza, you'll love the Price Elasticity Club, a club devoted to giving students the free pizza they've earned by clicking the ads on the website I made for my economics class." I eyed him suspiciously. Except for the mud on his face and his missing right pant leg, he had returned from his storm chase in pristine condition. "Riddle me this, Mr. Internet guy," I said, crossing my arms. Detectively. "How is it that you, allegedly completely mortal, are here? Without a car?" My car had to be sacrificed for a greater cause." His face clouded with the haze of an ideal. "A muddy ditch right outside of this campus. I had to hurdle my car into the ditch before a looming cloud could get me. Nobody said being a venture meteorologist with a bent for slowly accumulating money from 0.0001 cent web ads would be easy. Nobody says much about that type of person at all. What would I have to do if I joined this club of yours?" I asked suspiciously. I had noticed that he had artfully left out the adverse effect price elasticity had on consumer demand in his propagandizing. "You would consider joining my club? Wow. No one has ever shown an interest in appreciating price elasticity with me before. For a while there, I thought it was me and price elasticity against the world. This is all happening so fast. I'm not sure what another person would do in my club. Let me think about it for a second." He started pacing behind his display. His body seemed to flash in excitement. Or was that me, blinking really fast? "I know. You would have to spend every lunch period with me." "Yes. Making a fortune. Ooh. If only I could travel back a few clauses. If only I had said yes when that scientist asked if I wanted his extra time machine. At the end of the year, we use that fortune to try to communicate with deep-sea cetaceans." His eyes sparkled with zealous determination. "I know the truth is down there." He was so perfect at 8. "So I just sign here?" I asked. "Yes, right below the words, 'Edward hereby possesses the soul of.'" "Okay." I signed my name. Belle. I flipped the paper over for more space, then squished in the rest in tiny print. "Goose." "There," I said, scrawling the last letter with a flourish that continued off the page into a loop-de-loop in the air as my signature entails. I'd deal with the sole provision when the time came. "Belle," someone shouted from the next booth. It was Laura, a girl who sat across from me every day at lunch, giving her the privilege of having a name. Angelica was signing the club sheet and Lucy was signing fake sheets Laura gave to her so the wait would seem shorter. Lucy was based on a particularly impatient character. "Join our shopping club, our first meeting is today after school," one of them said. "You can pick which one, they're pretty interchangeable." "No, join our club," said Tom from the booth next to that. "The boys' club, kick the box. We consider you one of the boys because you are so laid back and chill." I couldn't believe it. One of the boys. I'd finally made it. "What's kick the box?" I asked. "Every Friday night, we take turns crouching in a box while the other guys kick it." "Sure, I'll play," I said, making their days. I felt good about myself after that. Socializing is a simple way to give back to the community. Murped Edward. We all turned towards him. He was wringing the hem of his shirt in his hands and shifting his eyes from one face to another, a common mannerism from the Victorian period. "What is it, Ednard?" asked Taylor. "Have you finally turned into one of your little machines?" Laura giggled, expecting Edward's comeback to be something hilarious. She wasn't disappointed. "Belle can't join your club," he said, super hilariously. "Friday night is when we click on each other's ads, the most vital part of the price elasticity club." "Fine," said Adam. "I guess Belle would rather click on advertisements than go to Las Vegas this Friday for a boys' club bachelor party. Edward made that threatening growl of his, and I can't resist him when he puts on his puppy face. "I suppose I'll join the shopping club instead," I grumbled. Sheesh. What was this, a Judd Apatow movie? I trudged over to Laura's sign-up sheet. I bet she didn't even know what Star Wars was, like in that scene in Knocked Up. The best part about Girls Club, said Laura as I signed my name and muttered words at random from my internal anger rant, is getting to know each other better. Each week I come up with a different question. Last week's question was which of Laura's headbands is the prettiest headband. This week's question is which humanoid in the Federation would be the most just political leader. Like, the most just. She tossed her hair, two-dimensionally. Probably a betazoid, I said, even though the whole discussion was moot because humans will always be too xenophobic to trust anything other than a human with executive power, and you can forget about androids for any elected office. Thank you, media. Why did Laura ask such stupid questions? I stared hard at my shoes, suffering silently. Connecting with these small-town girls was going to be impossible. Hey Ednard, want some garlic chocolate? Asked Adam, waving a Hershey's bar in front of Edward. Ew, gross, get that garlic away from me, said Edward. Relax, it's just Hershey's. Adam strutted away in a gait not quite as manly as Edward's unpredictable limb flail. But I wasn't going to let this go by. Maybe if Edward saw how much I already knew, he would tell me his secret. Wait, I said, holding Edward's head and waiting until his breathing calmed down after I touched him. The only people who don't like garlic are, maybe I like garlic, maybe I don't. All I know is, haven't tried it yet and I'm not going to start today. Same with avocados. He ran away before I could strap him to a board and interrogate him further.